Hello, boys and girls. So, we're ready to do history, chapter 6 in the story of the world. Last week we began talking about Abraham and how the Israelite people, the Israelite nation began. And we're going to do a little review of that before we read for today. So the three things you'll need for today. You'll need a pencil. It's a good idea to have one with a very pointy tip. If you have some kind of mechanical pencil, that will be great because it has an extra pointy tip. If you don't, then make sure the pencil that you do have is very sharp. I don't recommend using a pen in case you make a mistake. And then you'll need these 2 pages. Both of them say the Jewish people word search on top. One of them is actually the word search. And you'll need this page while we work on this page together, because at the bottom of it, it has all the words. It's kind of like your word bank for this page. So it has all the answers that will be on this page. This page has all the clues. We need to read the questions and answer. And the words on that page will help us remind us of what the answers are and help us how to spell it. So first thing we'll do is review what we learned last week. So the title of the section for last week was, no, that's this week. Let me turn back. Was God Speaks to Abraham. And so we started off by talking about reviewing how Sargon, if you remember Sargon, the military dictator, he ruled through fear. He got all the people to obey the people in the army. He conquered all those city-states and made them follow his rules because he was a military dictator. And so everyone followed what him and the army said to do because their job, they were ruling through fear. If you didn't obey them, you'd be punished. And it was a pretty scary time. But eventually, when Sargon died, all the structure, all the rules that he put in place kind of fell apart, and all the city-states started fighting again because they didn't have anyone to control them anymore, so then they wanted their freedom back. And so then what happened? So and in one of the cities of Sargon's empire was the city called Ur, U-R, remember that? And a very important man lived in this city. His name was Abram. And remember, the story we read about was from the book of Genesis in the Bible. And Abram lived with his father, Terah. And Terah was a merchant. So he was a trader. He traded things with others, like goods, different objects, like a cinnamon, cloth, gold, copper. So he traded things they had for things other people had. And so Ur was a perfect place because it was along the banks of the Euphrates River, so it was easy for ships to come through and trade with. So life was good, but when Sargon died and all the craziness happened, they were worried that the city would be burned down and that it was not a safe place to live anymore. So Terah was worried, and so what he did, he started praying to all the ancient Mesopotamian gods, they called them, and they believed in all these gods, the moon god, the sun god, and so he asked those gods what to do because he thought they would have the answer. And eventually Terah decided to move his family, him, Abram, and Abram's wife Sarai, he decided to move them to Haran. And in Haran, things were pretty good. People in Haran also worshipped the moon god, so that was normal to them. They're like, okay, we could settle here. They started doing trading. The family settled in, but at this point, Terah was pretty old. So Terah eventually died, and Abram had to make a choice. So now, what do I do? Do I stay in Haran? Do I go back to Ur, where I used to live? What should I do? And he's like, should I start praying to these gods that they believe in, or some other gods, to ask for what to do? And whose voice appears to him? God's voice appears to him. And God said, leave Haran and go to the land I will show you. I will give it to you and your children and I will make you into a great nation. I will bless your friends and curse your enemies, and everyone on earth will be blessed because of you." So God told Abram to go to Canaan. So what does he do? Abram never thought about going to Canaan before. It was far away. He'd never been there. He didn't know anything about it. But he obeyed God. He was obedient. So him and Sarai went to Canaan. And then once he got there, God came to him again. And he said, "I will make an agreement with you. Obey me and worship me, and you will be the father of a new nation. And the whole land of Canaan, I will give it to you and your children and your grandchildren. And I will change your name from Abram to Abraham. And I will change Sarai's name into Sarah, because Sarah means princess. And you will be the father of many children." What did they do? They laughed. "Oh, we're too old. We can't have children." And what happened? They did have children. And what did they name their first son? It means laughter. What is the word? Isaac. They named their first son Isaac. And Isaac had a son named Jacob. And then Jacob had 12 sons. And each of the 12 sons had families of their own. And this is how they started building more and more people in the new nation. And all these families lived in Canaan. And eventually each of all these families had more children and more children. And this is how the nation of Israel came to be. And so that's a review of last week's. So now that I'm already 7 minutes in and we already just did the review. But what I want to do, the first 10 questions on this page are questions that review what we just talked about. So let's answer those before we move on and learn new information. So I want you to get this page, your pencil, and this so we can look at the bottom for spelling. And we're going to start working. I will send the answer key to your parents. If you fall behind, just leave where you're at and move on with us. So don't stay on the one to try to catch up. Don't stress. Don't be upset. If I'm going too fast, just skip whatever you missed and keep moving on with me. And then your parents can help you fill in the ones you miss afterward, okay? So name and date on the top. Directions. Solve the following clues and write the answers in the spaces provided. All the answer words from the clues are in the word search and run from left to right, top to bottom, or diagonally. Find them now. So the first thing we need to do is number 1, solve the following clues, and then number 2, which you'll do on your own, is find these words in the word search. So all those words down there, you're going to find. Sorry, I think the camera froze. All those words down there you're going to find in the word search. So let's look at the first clue. Sargon the Great was a ruler of this riverside city-state where Terah and his family first lived. So where did Terah and his family first live? There's 2 little lines here, which mean this word has 2 letters. Do you remember the name of the place where Terah first lived? Our answers could be Abraham, Canaan, coat, cows, dream, Egypt, grain, Haran, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, Pharaoh, Sarah, slave, Terah, Ur. Yep, you guessed it. The answer is Ur. Because all the answers on this page are in uppercase, we can just write them in uppercase in these answers if that's easier. Like I said, pretty small spaces. You have to write pretty small. So, Terah and his family and Abram lived in Ur. U-R. Number 2. The name of Abram's father, the name of Abram's father. Who was Abram's father? Yeah, it was Terah. So Terah was Abram's father. If you want, you can circle the name Terah here and write it here. You could also use it, it's on this page. Terah is right there next to Ur, actually. If you want to copy it from there, you can write it there. T-E-R-A-H. Terah. You can copy it from right there and do lowercase, or copy it from the other page and do uppercase. Number 3. The threat of war with Babylon caused Terah to decide to move from his hometown. So this is when he was like, uh-oh, Sargon died, everyone wants to fight and go to war, this is not safe, we should leave Ur. He and his family moved to what merchant town? Do you remember the name of the town that they moved to? Did they move to Canaan? No, that's where God told Abram to go. Was it Egypt? No, we don't even talk about Egypt in that first section. Haran! It's Haran. So, Haran, that little city that's along the Euphrates River, or it's down the Euphrates River from Ur, they find another pretty good town to trade in. H-A-R, the last word in it, Ha-Ran. R-A-N. We know how to spell Ran. Haran. Number 4. Once they moved, Abram looked after the sheep, goats, and cattle. What is another name for cattle? So, when they moved, Terah continued to be a merchant trader, and he traded and got some sheep, goats, and cattle that Abraham looked after. You know what another name for cattle is? You see it? Ding, 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 cows. C-O-W-S. Cows. So number 4, there's 4 spaces, so we write 4 letters, C, and then O-W for ow. It's okay if your letters don't go exactly on those lines, but those lines are kind of to help you know that there's 4 letters. 4 letters. Okay? Number 5. When Terah died, Abram was advised by his one God, our God, to move to this new location. So where did God tell Abram to go? Canaan. You see it? Right next to Abraham's name on here. Abraham, Canaan. He told him to go to Canaan. Canaan, the spelling for Canaan is kind of tricky. So number 5, follow your pencil, 5, go all the way across and find it. You have C, A, N, and then 2 A's, which we don't usually see in English words. C-A-N, A-A-N. C-A-N, A-A-N. Good. Number 6. Abram's newfound God renamed both Abram and his wife. Abram's wife was renamed this. So what was Sarai's new name? It was Sarah. Uppercase S, A, R, A, H. Again, normally we don't write with all capital letters, but because that's how it is on the word search page, because that's how they're listed in the word search. We'll just write them like that. But normally it would just be uppercase S. So his wife's name was renamed by God to be Sarah, which means princess. And number 7, Abram's new name was this. Abram's new name was Abraham. So that's a lot of letters. I'll go slow. A, B, R, so A, B, R, A, and then Ham. H, A, M. Abraham. Abraham. Good. Number 8. Abram laughed at his God when he was told he would have a baby with his wife. When she did have that baby, they named him this because it means laughter. What did they name Abraham and Sarah's wife? What did they name Abraham and Sarah's baby? Isaac. Uppercase I. Z, like Z. Again, like Canaan, we have double A. I-S-A-A-C. Their son had a son named this. So do you remember what I said? Isaac had a son named Jacob. So we had Terah had a son named Abraham. Abraham had a son named Isaac. Isaac had a son named Jacob. J, A. Make sure you're on the line next to 9. Number 9, their son had a son named Jacob. J, A, K, A, B. Jacob. Good. Now number 10, Jacob had 12 sons. Which was his favorite? So this is where we start getting into our new lesson. So freeze here at number 10. Again, like I said, if you missed any of this, don't worry, I'm going to send your parents the answer key so that they can help you fill in anything you missed. But right now it's time to listen to your new history. Okay, so this part is called Joseph Goes to Egypt. Jacob's 12 sons didn't always get along with each other. They all wanted to be their father's favorite. But Jacob loved his son Joseph the best. The book of Genesis in the Bible tells us about Joseph and his brothers. So here's the story from the Bible about Joseph and his brothers. And I bet you know this story. And you also have the comic about this story. One day, Joseph was out in the fields with his brothers, watching his father's sheep. Suddenly, he heard his father, Jacob, calling, "Joseph! Joseph! Watch my sheep for me," Joseph told his brothers, and he ran quickly to his father's tent. "Yes, father?" he asked. "Joseph," Jacob said, "you are very special to me. So, I've made you a beautiful coat to wear." He held out a beautiful coat, as colorful as a field full of flowers, and as soft as a cloud, trimmed with a border of purple. Joseph could hardly believe his eyes. He was used to plain clothes, made from the skin of goats and the wool of his father's sheep. He took the coat and slipped it on. "Oh, thank you, father," he said. "I'll always wear it, even while I'm tending the sheep." And he ran back to his flock of sheep. "Look, Judah," he shouted. "Look, Benjamin. Look, all of you! Father made me a special coat!" His brothers stared at the coat. "Why didn't I get one?" Judah asked. "I'm older than you are." "Why did Father make a coat for you and not for any of the rest of us?" All of the brothers grumbled and complained about Joseph's coat. But Joseph wore the coat day and night. He boasted about the coat. That means he bragged. He bragged about how much his father loved him. Finally, the other 11 brothers could stand it no more. One morning, they were all out in a field a long way away from Jacob's tent when they heard Joseph coming. "Here comes our father's favorite," they complained. "Let's get rid of him, so that we never have to hear him brag about that colored coat again." And when Joseph came, they grabbed him, took his coat away, and threw him into a pit in the ground, so a big hole in the ground. When they saw some desert traders coming along, they pulled Joseph out of the pit and sold him to the traders as a slave. Then they smeared some goat blood on Joseph's coat and took it back to their father. "Look," they said, "we found this out in the desert. A lion must have killed Joseph." Jacob wept and wept because he thought that Joseph was dead. But the desert traders took Joseph down to Egypt and sold him to the Pharaoh as a slave. Down in Egypt, Joseph lived in the house of Potiphar, the captain of the Pharaoh's guards. So Potiphar was like the head guard. Joseph missed his father. He cried at nights because his brothers had been so cruel to him. But he worked hard in Potiphar's house. Soon, Potiphar took notice of him. He trusted Joseph more and more and gave him more and more responsibility. Soon, Joseph was running Potiphar's whole house. So he was like in charge of keeping order in Potiphar's whole house. But Potiphar's wife decided that Joseph had too much power in her husband's house. So she thought Potiphar gave Joseph a little too much responsibility. She was getting a little jealous too. She told lies about Joseph to Potiphar. And Potiphar believed his wife, and he had Joseph thrown in jail. So Potiphar's wife was jealous of how much Potiphar was giving Joseph power and liking him and kind of giving him responsibility. So Potiphar's wife told Potiphar some lies to get Joseph in trouble. So she made things up about Joseph that would get him in trouble. And Potiphar believed her and threw Joseph in jail. "What will happen to me?" Joseph thought. "Will I never be free? First, my brothers sell me as a slave, and then I end up in the Pharaoh's jail. What will I do?" One morning, one of the other prisoners looked troubled. "What's the matter?" Joseph asked. "I had a dream," the man said. "I dreamed that a vine grew out of the ground right in front of me. The vine grew branches. The branches grew grapes. And the grapes got ripe right there in front of my eyes. Then I squeezed the grapes in a cup and gave the cup to the Pharaoh." "I know what your dream means," Joseph exclaimed. "It means that Pharaoh is going to take you out of jail and forgive your crimes." "How do you know?" the dreamer asked. "Only God knows what dreams mean," Joseph said, "and he showed me the answer to your dream." Sure enough, 3 days later, soldiers appeared at the jail's door and took the prisoner away. So they said, "You've been pardoned. You can return to the Pharaoh's palace and work for him again." So as the dreamer was walking away, Joseph called after him, "Remember me! Tell Pharaoh that I am innocent, so that I can get out of jail." But the dreamer forgot all about Joseph, and Joseph stayed in prison for months and months and months. One night, the Pharaoh himself had a terrifying dream. When he woke up, he said, "Who can tell me what my dream means?" When the dreamer from the jail remembered Joseph, he said, "Great Pharaoh, the Israelite in your prison knows what dreams mean. His God tells him." "Get him at once," the Pharaoh said. So Joseph was brought from prison right to the Pharaoh's throne room. Pharaoh said to him, "I had a terrible dream. I dreamed that I was standing by the Nile. By the Nile River. That 7 big, fat cows walked up out of the river and started to graze on the riverbank. Then 7 ugly, thin cows came up from the water and swallowed the fat cows right up. What does it mean? Can you tell me?" "God gives me the wisdom to understand dreams," Joseph said. "He tells me that the 7 fat cows stand for 7 good years, when the Nile will overflow and the crops will grow and the Egyptians will have plenty to eat. But the 7 thin cows stand for 7 years of famine. The Nile won't flood, and your crops will die. Pharaoh, you should choose a wise man to put in charge of gathering grain." Grain. You'll need to remember that. So you'll need to put a wise man in charge of gathering grain during the 7 good years. Store the grain so that the Egyptians will have something to eat during the years of famine. So the famine means like hungry, starvation. They don't have any food. So Joseph is saying you should save your grain during the good years so that you have it for the years when you're not going to have food, when it'll be bad weather for crops, and put someone smart in charge to organize this. "A wise man?" the Pharaoh said. "No one is wiser than you, Joseph. I will put you in charge of gathering the grain. You will be second in command to me." Wow. So I guess because Joseph was able to interpret the Pharaoh's dream, the Pharaoh assumed that Joseph must be the wisest man. So he's like, "You're going to be the next in charge." Like he's like, Pharaoh's the most in charge. Now Joseph is like the next person in charge. That's how much Pharaoh trusted him. He's like giving him this much power. So Pharaoh took the ring off his finger and put it on Joseph's finger and gave Joseph white linen robes and a gold chain to wear around his neck. So these are all signs of power and importance and like royalty there. He gave Joseph a chariot to ride in. So that's like a horse and carriage. That type of thing. And then he had men run in front of him and shout, "Make way! Make way!" So like if someone important's coming, they would have people like clear the pathways for someone important to come through on a chariot. So it's a big deal. Joseph went all around Egypt, collecting grain from the farmers and storing it. Sure enough, for seven years the Nile overflowed and crops were good. But then famine came, and the Nile was low, and the ground became dry and cracked. The sun beat down on the fields, and the crops died. The Egyptians began to get hungry. Then Joseph started to hand out the grains that he had saved, a little bit for each family. In the lands around Egypt, people were hungry because of the famine, so he saved food for the city of Egypt, but then the areas around it didn't save it. But in Egypt, Everyone had food to eat because they saved. Up in Canaan, Jacob and his family were starving. So all of Joseph's 11 brothers and dad, they were all still in Canaan, and they were hungry. There was no water, their sheep and goats were dying, and their crops had failed. Finally, Jacob said to his sons, "I hear that they have grain in Egypt. Go get us some." Joseph's brothers walked for days and days and days through the hot sand to reach Egypt. When they got to the Pharaoh's palace, they were tired and thirsty and sweaty. So they traveled a far way. We're going to talk about it tomorrow on our map page, kind of like trace the path for how far they traveled to get to Egypt from Canaan. So they waited in a long, long line of hungry people before they could go into the room where Joseph sat, giving out grain. When they got there, they didn't even recognize Joseph at all. He had been in Egypt for years and years. He had grown up, and he was dressed like an Egyptian now. But Joseph recognized his brothers. They had sold him as a slave, and now they were here asking him for food. So they were there asking him for help, and they didn't even realize who he was. For weeks, Joseph didn't tell his brothers who he was. But finally, he could no longer bear to keep his secret. He invited them for a big dinner. And when dinner was over, he sent all his servants away. He said to his brothers, "I am Joseph! Is my father still alive?" The brothers could hardly believe their eyes, and they were terrified. "Now we are in his power," they whispered to each other. "He will kill us." Why do you think they thought he'd kill them? Because they knew the evil thing they did to him. So they thought, oh no, now that he's in power, he's going to kill us. But Joseph said, "I forgive the evil thing you did to me. God sent me ahead of you so that you could come and get food from me during this famine. Go back to Canaan and get all your flocks and your families and your tents. Come and live in Egypt, where there is plenty of food." So Joseph's father and brothers and all their families, the Israelites, came down to Egypt and lived there on the banks of the Nile. The Israelite nation grew larger and larger. They kept on worshiping their one God, even though the Egyptians believed in many different gods. And as long as Joseph lived, Pharaoh was kind to the Israelites and let them have a part of Egypt for their very own. So, did Joseph want revenge on his brothers? Was he cruel to his brothers because of what they did to him? No. He did a very powerful thing. He forgave them. Forgiveness is such a powerful tool. Instead of holding on to that anger, he saw what happened to him as a mission God sent him on. That God sent him ahead. Everything happened because it was God's plan to send him ahead to make sure that there was enough food so that people didn't die, and that his brothers could come to him and get food eventually, and that the whole Israelite nation could move to be with him. Pretty powerful stuff. So, I know this has been a very long history lesson. Let's finish up this page and then we can go. So, we're on number 10. Jacob had 12 sons. Number 10. Jacob had 12 sons. Which was his favorite? Well, that one's easy. We just read all about this guy. Who was Jacob's favorite son? Follow number 10 all the way across, and we're writing Joseph. Oops. You can do lowercase if you want, but I'll keep doing uppercase because that's how I've been doing the whole page. two-letter J-O-S-E-P-H, Joseph. Number 11. Jacob made this special, colorful piece of clothing for his favorite son. So what did he make for Joseph? He made him a coat. O, like O, you may not use at the end of English words. C-O-A-T. Coat. Number 12. Because of the envy his brothers felt, they sold Joseph to be this. So Joseph's brothers sold him to be a slave. This is a strongman E word. A, and also supporter E. English words can't end with V, so we need an E on the end. Slave. S-L-A-V-E. Slave. Again, that was number 12, followed all the way across. Slave. Number 13. Joseph was taken to this country. So where did the slaves where did the men who took him take him? What country? Egypt. They took him to Egypt. Uppercase E. J. G says J before E, I, or Y. E, G, Y. P. T. Egypt. E, G. E-G-Y-P-T. Sorry, it keeps looking like my computer's freezing. Number 14. While in prison, Joseph demonstrated his ability to tell the meaning of something we think about while we're sleeping. He knew what a blank meant. So Joseph could interpret what? What are those things you have when you sleep that look like visions? A dream, right. You're going to have to write pretty small on here. D. R. And then E-A. So E-A. D-R-E-A-M. Dream. It's okay if it's all smushed in there. Number 15. Later, someone had a dream, here's the word dream, about 7 fat cows that were eaten by 7 thin cows. Who had this dream? Who was it that had this dream? It was the Pharaoh, right. So PH for A. R. We have another A. So P, H, A, R, A, O, H. Pharaoh. And number 16. Joseph knew the Pharaoh's dream meant that 7 good years would be followed by 7 years of famine. To help the people, he suggested they collect this in each of the 7 good years, so there would be enough during the dry years. So what type of thing did he say that we should collect, that they should store and collect? It was called grain. So he wanted them to collect grain. G. R. A. So A-I, H letter A, they may not use at the end of English words. G, R, A, N. Green. G-R-A-I-N. Good. Alright, so now like I said, I will send a picture of this completed page so your parents can help you fill in the rest if you miss anything. And what you're going to do on your own is all the words that we just answered are down here. It says, if you have difficulty answering the clues on the previous page, see if you can find the right word from this list. Here's these words, and now you're going to find these words up here in the word search. So I already right off the bat see a few words sticking out to me. Jacob, dream. Alright, but you can do it on your own. Good luck. I hope you were able to pay attention during that whole long history lesson, but I had fun talking about it with you, and tune in tomorrow for a map page. Bye!